to the presentation. My name is Tianxiang Dai. I'm a researcher from German National Research Center for Applied Cybersecurity, ASINA, and Fraunhofer Institute for Secure Information Technology, SIT, in Darmstadt, Germany. Here I am going to present our work at the Hijackers Guide to the Galaxy, both parts talking over Internet resources. In this talk, I will briefly introduce what digital resources are, how they are managed by providers, and which providers and customers are considered in our work. Then we will have a look at how to take over those customer accounts to hijack their resources. I will show how many customers and the resources are vulnerable. As an example, I will also present some potential resource manipulations once an account gets hacked. In the end, I will propose a few countermeasures and conclude. What are digital resources? By saying digital resources, we mean the resources you can only own digitally. For example, domain name, IP addresses, cloud computing, server certificates. Normally, these resources cannot be created on your own. To get these resources, you need to go to certain providers and purchase from them. Typically, you will have an account at the provider so that you can conveniently manage your resources there. In our work, we consider 4 types of providers: regional internet registries, RIR for short, from whom you can buy IP addresses, for example, ARIN and RIPE. Domain registrars, for whom you can buy domain names, for example, GoDaddy, Alibaba. Cloud providers such as Amazon AWS and Microsoft Azure. Certificate authorities, CA for short, where you can buy server certificate such as Tactical, DigiCert. We also perform customer-side measurements. We include 75% of customers of IRs and Alexa top 100,000 domains as our customer database. How do you attack providers? We design the attacker by taking over customer accounts from off paths via password recovery. First, the attacker does DNS cache poisoning to target the provider's DNS resolver and tries to point the customer's mail server to attacker's server. Then, he triggers the password recovery email for the customer account. As the provider's DNS resolver is already poisoned, the provider will send the email to attacker's server. Thus, the attacker can reset the password and gain access to the account. Afterwards, he can log in and manipulate the resources. We evaluated 3 different types of off-path DNS cache poisoning methods. One uses BGP sub-prefix hijacking. Another one uses side channel. This method is also called set DNS. Last one uses IP fragmentation. We found that for BGP sub-prefix hijacking and IP fragmentation attacks, majority of the providers we tested are vulnerable. While for the side channel attacks, only few providers are vulnerable. On the other side, how many customers are vulnerable to the attack? For a customer to be vulnerable, it has to fulfill 2 properties. First, the customer's login information or card details needs to be known by the attacker. That's a prerequisite to trigger password recovery. We find out that for most providers, you only need the email address. Luckily, or maybe unluckily, we have WHOIS database. It is publicly available and contains contact information of many of the resources. For our customer dataset, we can get contact emails for 75% of the ASs and 11% of the Alexa domains. Even if we can't find the information in WHOIS, we can still guess the account sometimes. For example, some use classical emails such as admin@company or webmaster@company. The other property of a vulnerable customer needs to fulfill is that the name server configuration of the email domain meets the requirement of specific DNS cache poisoning methods. We find that around 50% of the customers are vulnerable to BGP sub-prefix hijacking, around 10% are vulnerable to side channel, and around 20% are vulnerable to IP fragmentation. Since so many customer accounts are vulnerable, so are their resources. By mapping those customer accounts to digital resources, especially IPv4 addresses and domains, we get to know how many resources are vulnerable. Even though only around 50% of the tested customers are vulnerable, they already put a majority of the resources in danger. We find that 93% of IPv4 addresses and 65% of domains are vulnerable. It indicates that larger customers are even more vulnerable than smaller ones. Regardless of the square numbers, let's see how an attacker can manipulate the resources. We take account of LIR on the RIPE as an example. Firstly, the attacker can manipulate RPK status. He can modify root origin announcements so that he can either disrupt the propagation of BGP announcements or expose an RPK-protected network to BGP hijacking. The attacker can also manipulate a RAP database or WHOIS database. This would allow him to impersonate AI representatives or even affect network connectivity, as some BGP routers use WHOIS data for filtering. Another obvious manipulation is account management. The attacker can create some new users with admin rights so that he can still have access even the account is claimed back. He can modify contact data or organization details. This would block physical contact between the provider and the customer. He can even terminate the membership, which will delete all the resources. Lastly, the attacker can possibly transfer or resell the resources to a third party and make profit out of it. As for other types of providers, the attacker can do some resource-specific manipulations too. For example, if he gets access to a customer's account over HCA, he can easily revoke current certificates and reissue some new ones. If he logs into a domain registrar, he can delegate the whole domain to malicious name servers or resell the domains for profit. How can we countermeasure these attacks? We propose countermeasures in two categories. First, to make it harder to take over accounts. Account details should be better hidden. The system should be separated for high privilege accounts. Captures and DNSSEC would also help. The other category is to make it harder for manipulation resources. Two-factor authentications and account notification should always be activated. Strict account access restrictions can help. Besides, more manual reviews or longer waiting time should also prevent some malicious transactions. As a conclusion, we find that resource databases are poorly protected. Adversaries can take over the accounts and manipulate them. We also show that attacks against accounts are practical. Large fraction of the providers and customers are vulnerable to certain off-pass attacks. That's even much easier for on-pass attackers. There are already countermeasures, but most of them are not enforced. Obviously, higher security or stricter authentication lowers usability, which may drive customers away. If you are interested in more details, you may check our paper published at Usenix Security 2021. This is a joint work with Philip Geithner, Dr. Haya Schumann, and Professor Michael Widener. Thank you so much for attending. Questions are welcome.
Tian, with the population that you studied, you had a number of countermeasures. Do you have any sense of what percentage of the population employs countermeasures today, like two-factor authentication?
Not exactly, but as we checked all the providers, so most of them have the option to enable two-factor authentication, but most of them are not enabled by default. If I remember correctly, only one or two to enforce everyone to use it, but most of others, like, it's disabled by default, so it's quite make it more vulnerable.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Oh, excellent. So from Blake Willis, we have, what vector are you suggesting an attacker would use to gain access to a RIPE NCC LAR's access account?
Excuse me, I missed the beginning part.
What attack vector would you suggest someone would use to gain access to a specific resource, and the specific resource is the RIPE NCC LAR's access account?
Okay, I see. The attack vector we suggested in this paper, in this work, is to use DNS poison to hijack the account. So the way we measured is to using off-pass DNS poisoning. So there are recently like 3 different works about off-pass DNS poisoning. So we measured them against the RAP NCC. And
one challenging part is to get the customer account. So if you can do some like social engineering, so that makes it much easier. If you can't, we can do like a more educated guess. So for example, you can get the account information from who is the IP address. So you can directly get the like technical contact. So most of the time that is the account used for the registration. And you can try to do password recovery, and after the DNS get poisoning, the attacker can receive the email and access the account. So that's what we try to do in this work.
Thank you. We have a question at the microphone.
Hi, my name's Leo Vigoda, Anpolis LLC. You mentioned that if someone takes over a RIPE NCC single sign-on account, they can transfer IP addresses or AS numbers away. It was my understanding, and I've never used the transfer process myself, that they actually do out-of-band validation of identity. Is that not the case? Or is this...
Yes, that's true. To transfer the IP address, you need to provide some document, some legal document to prove like you actually own that, and also prove you are like you can represent that legal person.
Does that mean the scale of the risk is disruption to the use of the resources rather than the theft of the resources permanently?
Yes, it depends. It depends on how serious the check is conducted. So, because for example, sometimes they only check the scanned version, so that can be easily manipulated. But if they really do the check in person, that would be hard.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we have a similar question in the chat. This is from Andrew William Smith, and he's asking to create or modify ROAs, at least within Aaron's using hosted RPKI. Wouldn't the attacker also need to access to the organization's private key in order to sign the ROAs?
Yes, if you want to resign it, you can do it. But if you want to just revoke the things or just delete the stuff, you don't need to access the private key, right?
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much, Tian.
Yeah, thank you.